to demonstrate where that value is coming from, and it can be direct revenue. It can be sort of indirect revenue, so maybe you're going to start doing something that's slightly less sort of sexy than the end vision, or maybe it's some other different source of revenue, like you're going to build up a database that has some resale value, an asset that has some value rather than a recurring. But
so, how do you get your half-baked idea over the line, get it funded in such a way that you can demonstrate something with this disruptive and emerging technology? I'd love the views from the panel. Jason, I think you must kick us off just around how do you develop a business case for funding a new disruptive product without the recurring revenue up front?
Yeah, I mean, look, it is a challenge. I mean, we're going into a different world. We all know that, and I think everyone's sort of fairly expert in this audience. I work quite closely with a venture advisory firm. We were talking about it earlier in the week, and I think we were knocking around numbers as well. So 80% downsides in valuations recently is been knocked around. I've heard of as low as an 87% down round. So I like to start with the doom. Start with the worst case. Start with the bad news. The good news is there's always money around. There's always money around. There's always opportunity. That's always been my motto. There's always something around. You just have to hunt. It's not necessarily the great, huge, visionary, Neumann, Jesus-like, changing the world view now. I think you're going to have to be more practical. And what I'm hearing is what that means in practical terms is a demonstrable, clear path to revenue within 1 to 2 years. And if not, then I think you're into bootstrapping and you're into smart ways of doing it. And there are lots of ways of bootstrapping. We all know that. You can work on it as a project among many of you over a longer period, and you can find smart ways around to partner, or you partner with a large corporate. So it's all there. But I think, you've just got to kind of accept the changing environment, and it will come back, but it's probably going to be a few years. So I think you just say, like, okay, we've got to demonstrate where that value is coming from, and it can be direct revenue. It can be sort of indirect revenue, so maybe you're going to start doing something that's slightly less sort of sexy than the end vision, or maybe it's some other different source of revenue, like you're going to build up a database that has some resale value, an asset that has some value rather than a recurring. But you're going to have to be fairly practical about it, I think.
Yeah, sure. So I've always been on the startup scale-up side, trying to get investment. And I would never, ever, ever call WeWork disruptive. But what they have done, and what we should all take out of their book, is the vision. How on earth did Adam Neumann do that? He sold a vision. And I think, in my opinion, investment is quite binary. It's done on merit. So it's done on, they've got their ARR, MRR that they're meeting their targets or superseding that, or they're being sold on a sales narrative. And that narrative is pretty much what you said is, hey, here's where we're going to get to in 2 years. Here's our path. Here's our journey there. But then you have to make sure that if you're on that side of things, you're doing absolutely everything that you can and have a proper investment in your product and using those product principles to get to market quickly, learn, experiment, and expand on that. Now, obviously, I've been in companies where product market fit has taken 6 months. I've been in companies where it's taken 3 years. And again, that means it's difficult when you're in that latter one as well. You have pressure from investors. You have pressure internally as well. You have people leaving. And I think ultimately, depending on what kind of industry you're in, I mean, it's not normal for companies to get to product market fit in 3 to 6 months. That's so quick. And I think that there needs to be an understanding in the industry that it does take a while, and that, sometimes investors do need to wait for their 3, 5, 10 years in order for them to get their money, even if they do get it back in the first place. And that's, why they go 10x on some returns and their portfolio is so mixed. But I definitely think that, and we've already seen it, that VCs, even Asian investors, are so much more cautious, and they're going to be for a long time as well. But I think that forces the companies to find their true product market fit themselves, and quickly as well.
I think we all would share the view that we'd love one day for investors to kind of become more pragmatic and reasonable with their expectations. Frankie, you sit on a couple of other companies and advise. Do you think that's happening in the investor market? Do you think they're becoming a bit more savvy in terms of how to do this, or are they still just going to thought leadership workshops and coming back with buzzwords?
I'm originally from Yorkshire, so I think there's an inherent tightness of spending cash. So I generally treat investor money like my own. I think that comes from my grandparents and my father, who's kind of founded his own business not in the technology sector. But generally speaking, I think it became old-fashioned to be profitable and revenue generating. I think the tides have changed, and I think the businesses that have proven that they can actually generate revenue, have a real growth curve, commit and actually deliver on the commitments. And that's the big thing. If you say something to an investor, that could be product market fit, it could be build, it could be a geographic expansion. But when you say you're going to do something, you absolutely do it. And that for me is kind of a proof point when investors, the board, agree more funding, agree a different investment curve. So as you reference, I sit on a learning, as a non-executive advisor for a learning platform. They're not VC funded, they're just hit in 12 months kind of revenue break even. They're a 100-person company. A lot of them have stock. It's just an old school, like, beautiful business. They have 250 customers. I generally think, like, we've just had a little bit of, I'd say, like a hangover, and people have just got a little bit excited from these crazy valuations. I think the second point for me is choosing your investors. Depending on which sector you're in, it isn't a money game. Like, certainly for us, it's about what does that unlock, what value do they bring. The actual valuation is kind of by and by. If you have loads of money, but then people can't unlock something for you, it's partly irrelevant. So we have, very similar to Form 3, of which I'm sure Steve will reference, kind of foundational clients, of which they're partners with us. They do more work with us, they support us, they sit on the board. We then have BlackRock as our primary investor in our Series C round. They have huge amount of fintech investment globally. They've introduced us to a number of potential clients. They're a great partner in all of what we do. And if someone offered a bigger valuation but couldn't bring that value, it would be kind of pointless, because all you're doing is kind of pumping a number for, speculative reasons to make yourself feel better on the market. But these businesses, all of us, certainly, 10x is not yet profitable. We're cash flow generative, we're revenue generative, and we had quite strict budgets. Any of the 10x's in the room know we have a budget and we have to hit it. It's really important for us. So I think discipline, like I said, just old school business principles are so critical. And then when you're choosing investors, choose wisely.
No, good feedback. And I'm mindful that there may be some people in the room that don't work directly with boards of investors. They may be people within an organisation trying to get a niche and try and move an idea forward. When that investment group is, for example, maybe the executive team of the organisation, Steve, what are your tips for helping to feel confident in signing off something that someone might bring to you as an idea?
Sure. So, I guess I'm one of the co-founders of Form 3, and it's a company that we set up 6 years ago. I think we've been through 5 investment rounds, and raised about 200 million in total. But I think my observation is that there are very different classes of investors, right? So when we started up, and it was like 4 of us with a whiteboard, and that was it. We initially went out to a group of angel investors. I think the real thing about angel investors is finding someone who understands the problem that you're trying to solve. So if you're coming from an industry where you see a problem, you want to build a startup, find other people that also see that there's a problem there. You're not going to have any kind of execution record because you haven't got started yet. But the key thing is, if other people believe that's a problem as well, they're going to be interested in solving it. So for us, I think a key thing was, I think we actually ended up with a very broad range of angels, 20, I think 15, 20, something like that when we started, but all from that kind of background, understanding how financial services work, the kind of challenges that exist in banks with all this piles of old tech. As we kind of got started and started on the execution, the next set of investors that we engage with were really strategic ones. So those were the customers that we started to engage with and say, actually, we can help you solve these problems. It's the same set of problems, but now here's a funded startup that is just focused on solving one of these. As we started to prove our execution and started to talk to them, going to essentially a big customer of yours and asking them for $1 million, $5 million, for a large enterprise that understands that there's a problem there and is struggling to address a problem in-house, for them it's kind of a no-brainer. So strategic investment for us has been a big thing that's helped us really kind of get off the ground. As we've matured, then we've brought in the VCs and the financial investors. They won't know anything about the industry or the problem that you're trying to solve. What they will look at is your track record. So, have you executed on what you've done today? Have you begun to solve that problem? Have you got customers lining up to have you solve that problem? I think the one thing then to just recap is that there are different types of investors, and I think you have to kind of get people who believe in the problem be able to show an execution path, and then you'll be able to kind of pull more people in on that journey, even if they don't come from the same background. The other thing I was going to share, and I thought this was really interesting, actually, again, when we had a catch-up earlier in the week. So we kind of have 4 random people that we've kind of picked off the street, right? And we were talking about disruptive tech. But actually, every one of us is working for existing companies in the markets that we operate in. None of us is doing, blue sky AI blockchain things with no customers and going, we're going to take over the world. And I think that was kind of interesting, right? Because actually, if you're going to go and address those kind of problems, you kind of need the backing of the people in the market who are already making money off it. It's very difficult, particularly from, if you take into account the network effect of going into a market, telling everyone, basically pissing off everybody, saying, we're going to kick you out, we think you're a bunch of idiots, we know how to do it properly. Very, very difficult to do that.
Yeah, really good insights. And I think, you've got a blend of product and technology leaders sat here, and the recurring theme is that we're talking about the outcome of the technology, not the technology itself. The days where you're just going to burn what was left of your Q4 budget on something novel are probably gone, right? There has to be a point and there has to be a purpose. And that's ultimately at the heart of making sure that these cases go from really good ideas into something that other people can participate in. We want to avoid the white elephants that we've all kind of seen and heard about in our careers of just technology projects that were there to spend money rather than to solve a particular problem.